The story of the richest Filipina woman in America is not merely a tale of financial accumulation, it is a narrative of radical reinvention, cultural bridge building, and a masterful synthesis of seemingly disparate worlds. While several names could contend for this title based on varying metrics, from real estate magnates like Lloyda Nicholas Lewis to tech executives like Dina Dwyer Owens, the archetype that captures the most compelling journey is that of a self-made billionaire who has seamlessly woven together the threads of high fashion, cutting-edge technology, and profound cultural philanthropy. Let us call her Isabella Bella Reyes, a composite figure representing the apex of this achievement. Her life is a stunning diptych, one panel painted with the bespoke silks of Parisian couture and the rarefied air of art auctions, the other etched with the code of Silicon Valley, the aggressive growth charts of venture capital, and the quiet hum of server farms. To understand her is to understand how a first-generation immigrant from Manila or Cebu engineered a life that commands respect on Rodeo Drive and Sand Hill Road with equal authority. Her origin story is etched with the familiar hardships of the immigrant dream, but elevated by an almost preternatural strategic vision. Born into a middle-class family in the Philippines, perhaps the daughter of an engineer and a teacher, she excelled academically, displaying a fierce aptitude for mathematics and systems thinking. She arrived in the United States for university not on family wealth, but on a formidable combination of scholarships, relentless drive, and the classic Filipino value of diskarte, resourceful ingenuity. She might have attended Stanford or MIT, studying computer science or electrical engineering. While her peers focused on getting jobs at established tech firms, she saw the architecture of the future. In the late 1990s or early 2000s, she identified a fundamental inefficiency, perhaps in data logistics, payment systems for the unbanked, or enterprise software, and built a lean, elegant solution. Her company did not just solve a problem, it created a new market. The ascent was not overnight. It was a grueling decade of 100-hour weeks, pitching skeptical investors who often underestimated the young Filipino woman before them, and navigating a tech ecosystem that was not designed for someone like her. Her breakthrough came when her platform's scalability and elegant design attracted a massive acquisition by a giant like Google, Salesforce, or Amazon, or when she took her own company public in a landmark IPO. In a single day, her net worth soared into the billions. This was her foundational fortune, the Silicon Valley wealth, liquid, volatile, and rooted in intellectual property. This is where the story diverges from the typical tech billionaire narrative. Instead of retreating into a hoodie and a life of cryptic tweets, Isabella Reyes executed a second, even more personal act of creation. She built a lifestyle that honored her heritage, her hard-earned success, and her multifaceted identity. Her life is managed from a triumvirate of power bases, a historic tech-integrated penthouse in San Francisco's Pacific Heights, a modernist glass estate in the hills of Los Angeles overlooking the Pacific, and a working ranch family retreat in Montana or Colorado. The San Francisco residence is her operational command center. It looks not like a tech bro's dormitory, but like a curator's home. The walls feature rotating exhibits of both established American contemporary artists and rising Filipino masters like Ronald Ventura and Annie Cabigting. The bookshelves hold leather-bound classics alongside white papers on quantum computing. A dedicated war room features floor-to-ceiling data visualization screens tracking her investments and philanthropic projects, while the living room boasts a Bosendorfer piano and original Art Nouveau pieces. Her LA estate is the showcase of her couture life. Its climate-controlled closets are archives of fashion history, impeccable terno gowns by Filipino couturiers like Michael Cinco and Pepito Albert, worn with pride at galas and state dinners, hang beside custom pieces from Chanel, Schiaparelli, and rare vintage Dior. This is not mere shopping, it is a strategic curation of personal brand, signaling her power in both Western and Filipino cultural spheres. The ranch is the family anchor, where she insists on no-screens weekends, horseback riding with her children, and cooking elaborate Filipino feasts in a state-of-the-art kitchen, ensuring her family is grounded in both privilege and tradition. Her daily routine is a study in compartmentalized intensity. She wakes at 5:30 a.m., not to emails, but to a silent hour of meditation and a rigorous session with a private trainer. Breakfast is a nutritious, prepared meal enjoyed while her chief of staff walks her through the day. By 8 a.m., she is in her first video conference, perhaps with the board of her flagship tech foundation, or with the managing partners of her venture firm, Reyes Capital. This firm is her true passion project, focusing explicitly on funding minority and women founders, particularly in overlooked sectors like femtech, sustainable agriculture tech, and ASEAN market entry strategies. She is a famously hands-on investor, leveraging her operational experience and her vast network. Her afternoons might be spent in LA, attending a fitting for a gown for the Met Gala, where she will co-chair a table, or in personal meetings with the directors of her philanthropic arms, the Reyes Foundation for STEM Education in the Global South and the Philippine Heritage and Digital Archives Project. The latter is a multi-million-dollar effort to digitize centuries of Filipino art, literature, and historical documents, making them accessible worldwide, a legacy project born of deep cultural pride. Her social life is a powerful networking engine disguised as glamour. She is a fixture at the most exclusive events, the Venice Film Festival, Art Basel, the Tony Awards. But she is never just a guest. She is often a sponsor, using these platforms to elevate Filipino artists or to host dinners for her portfolio company CEOs. Her circle is deliberately eclectic: a Supreme Court justice, a K-pop mogul, a Nobel laureate in physics, and a celebrated Filipino chef. She moves between these worlds with a chameleon's ease, discussing blockchain governance at a tech summit in the morning and the nuances of piña fabric weaving at a cultural salon in the evening. Yet, at the core of her existence is family. She is likely married to another highly successful but lower-profile individual, perhaps a surgeon, academic, or former diplomat, who provides a stabilizing counterpoint to her public whirlwind. They guard their children's privacy fiercely, sending them to elite schools but requiring them to spend summers in the Philippines, working on community projects or learning Tagalog from their grandparents. The richest moniker, therefore, is about far more than her bank account, which reliably places her in the multi-billionaire ranks. It is about the richness of her influence. She has redefined what it means to be a Filipino power broker in America. She is not confined to an ethnic niche. She is a dominant force in mainstream American capitalism and culture, who deliberately uses that platform to pull her heritage into the center of global prestige. Her life answers a profound question. What do you do after you've won the Silicon Valley game? Her answer is to build a legacy that spans couture and code, that turns wealth into both cultural preservation and future-facing investment, and that lives with a regal, intentional flourish, proving that the apex of the American dream can wear a terno as elegantly as a Patagonia vest. Isabella Reyes's existence is governed not by happenstance, but by the precise mechanics of a life engine she designed, a self-perpetuating system where capital, influence, culture, and family operate in a synchronized cycle. To move past the dazzling surface of her homes and wardrobe is to enter the engine room, where her true power is generated and deployed. Her daily operations are a masterclass in leverage, where every asset, financial, social, intellectual, is put to work not just for more growth, but for defined, legacy-altering impact. This is the realm where her identity as a tech titan and a cultural sovereign fully emerges, creating a blueprint for 21st century influence that is both uniquely American and distinctly Filipino. The engine room, a week in the system. A typical week is a ballet across sectors and continents, managed by a hyper-competitive executive team that functions as an extension of her will. Monday through Tuesday, San Francisco, the architect. These are her builder days, dedicated to the machinery of creation and scale. Mornings are reserved for Reyes Capital, her venture firm. She doesn't just review pitch decks in a boardroom, she hosts founder firewall sessions, intense, one-on-one deep dives with her portfolio CEOs, where her primary value isn't her capital, but her merciless, insightful questioning on unit economics, talent retention in a competitive market, and long-term regulatory strategy. She is known for a simple rule: she will open her formidable black book of contacts only after a founder has demonstrably exhausted every resource in their own network, teaching a brutal lesson in self-reliance. After days are for her flagship Reyes Foundation for STEM Equity. Here, she doesn't just approve grants, she interrogates the theory of change behind each proposal. A grant for a high school robotics program in Stockton must have a data-backed plan for achieving over 50% participation from Black, Latino, and Filipino students, with clear metrics on college matriculation in STEM fields. She might cap this day with an intimate dinner at her Pacific Heights penthouse for 8 guests: 2 Stanford AI researchers, a climate tech founder from her portfolio, the director of the San Francisco Ballet, and an avant-garde sculptor from Manila. The conversation will zigzag from neural networks to the choreography of movement, deliberately cross-pollinating ideas in a controlled, high-trust environment. Wednesday through Thursday, Los Angeles/New York, the connector. Here, she operates as the ultimate conduit between hard capital and soft culture. In Los Angeles, she might have a private lunch on the terrace of the Getty Museum with a veteran studio head and the CFO of a global streaming giant. The conversation, over heirloom tomato salads, would subtly pivot to the commercial and cultural potential of a major limited series about the Philippine Revolution of 1896, with the note that a significant portion of the production budget is already secured through her ASEAN-focused entertainment investment fund. In New York, she could spend an afternoon in a Chelsea gallery, not just browsing, but acquiring a major installation piece for her collection. The acquisition is paired with a negotiation to underwrite the gallery's upcoming landmark exhibition, Archipelagic Visions, featuring diasporic Southeast Asian artists. These are not leisure activities, they are high-stakes influence transactions. Prior to each engagement, her chief of staff delivers a concise memo outlining key attendees, their current strategic dilemmas, and Bella's desired outcomes for the interaction. Friday, global/philanthropic, the steward. Fridays are structurally dedicated to stewardship, often leveraging technology to collapse distance. Via a secure, ultra-high-definition holographic telepresence suite, a technology her VC firm was an early backer of, she might sit virtually in the conservation lab of the National Museum of the Philippines in Manila. She reviews newly digitized high-resolution scans of 17th-century libritos, prayer books from the Augustinian order, discussing preservation techniques with the lead archivist. Later, she chairs a virtual board meeting for the Reyes Global Scholars Endowment. This program is archetypal of her philosophy. It doesn't just write tuition checks, it provides a comprehensive success scaffold for 100 first-generation Filipino-American college students annually. This includes a pre-college boot camp, a dedicated mentor who is a senior leader in their chosen field, guaranteed summer internships at partner companies, often her portfolio firms, and wraparound mental health and academic support. The goal is not just graduation, but the creation of a powerful, interconnected next-generation leadership cohort. Weekend, Montana Ranch. This is sacred, non-negotiable. Time the reset button for the entire system. Technology is limited to family movie nights. The agenda is built around physical presence and tradition. She and her children cook elaborate Filipino meals, kare-kare, pancit, lechon kawali, with ingredients sourced from a local Asian grocer she quietly subsidizes to stock Filipino staples. Cooking is a lesson in heritage, each recipe a story about a province, a relative, a history. They spend hours hiking the property, where she translates complex business or philanthropic principles into simple metaphors drawn from the landscape. An ecosystem resilience as a model for an investment portfolio, a river's persistence as a lesson in long-term strategy. This is where she recharges her own spirit and where the core values for the next generation, ambition paired with responsibility, global reach rooted in cultural specificity, are silently and powerfully embedded. The philosophy of power, intentional abundance, and bayanihan at scale. Bella Reyes's mindset is her ultimate and most proprietary operating system. It can be broken down into core, actionable principles that guide every decision. Wealth as a verb, not a noun. In her calculus, money is not for hoarding, but for activating. She views her capital as deployment-ready energy with a half-life. $1 billion sitting in a diversified trust is a slowly decaying asset of missed opportunity. It must be working, fueling a startup disrupting supply chain finance in Southeast Asia, restoring a critical mangrove forest in Palawan to both sequester carbon and protect coastal communities, or endowing a permented chair in Trans-Pacific Filipino studies at an Ivy League university. Cultural capital is the hardest currency. She operates on the understanding that a profile in the Wall Street Journal gets you a meeting, but a curated collection featured by Sotheby's and a seat on the board of the Museum of Modern Art grant you a different kind of authority. This soft power, or cultural capital, opens doors in diplomacy, academia, and legacy industries that pure financial wealth cannot jimmy. Her legendary Couture collection is a deliberate part of this strategy. It is wearable, cultural diplomacy. When she wears a modernized terno by a Filipino designer to a White House state dinner, she is not just making a fashion statement, she is conducting a silent and powerful negotiation for her culture's place at the pinnacle of global prestige. The diaspora leverage model. She sees the 4 million-strong Filipino diaspora not as a monolithic community to be marketed to, but as a global, distributed intelligence and influence network. Her investments often aim to identify and connect high-potential nodes in this network. For example, her fund might back a logistics software startup founded by a Filipino engineer in Dubai, specifically to optimize trade routes between the Middle East and Southeast Asia, leveraging the founder's innate cultural and linguistic understanding of both markets. Radical pragmatic philanthropy. Her giving is strategic to the point of being coldly analytical. It is social venture capital. She expects clear KPIs, sustainable financial models beyond her seed funding, and a clear path to scalability or systemic impact. The Philippine Heritage and Digital Archives Project is the quintessential example. It's not a sentimental act of preservation, it's an ambitious bid to build the definitive digital platform and scholarly resource for Philippine studies globally. The platform will be licensed to universities worldwide, generating revenue to fund further digitization and eventually become self-sustaining, a perpetual engine for cultural knowledge. the invisible challenges, navigating the in-between. Her life, for all its curated glory, exists in a series of perpetual, exhausting intersections where scrutiny is relentless. The authenticity trap. She is constantly policed by different constituencies. Old money East Coast elites might privately dismiss her as nouveau riche despite her accomplishments. The hardcore Silicon Valley set may see her deep cultural engagements as a distraction from the pure tech focus they idolize. Simultaneously, some voices within the Filipino diaspora might critique her for not being traditional enough, or for not directing all her wealth toward immediate poverty alleviation in the homeland. She must perpetually validate her belonging in worlds that did not originally make space for her. The burden of representation. Every action is magnified, every stumble framed as representative. A failed investment in a biotech startup isn't just a business loss, it becomes fodder for narratives about Filipino risk aversion or overreach. This pressure to be a flawless symbol for an entire global diaspora is immense and a source of profound private isolation. The succession puzzle. Beyond the corporate boards of her companies, her entire ecosystem, the foundation's specific equity mandate, the investment thesis focused on diasporic leverage, the cultural advocacy, is built around her personal vision, energy, and unique biography. Building an institutional structure that can outlast her, that won't devolve into generic low-impact philanthropy or conservative asset management after she's gone, is perhaps her most profound and unsolved challenge. The legacy in motion, redefining the richest life. The title Richest Filipino Woman in America, in the context of Isabella Reyes, is being actively and dramatically redefined. It is transitioning from a static Forbes list measurement of net worth to a dynamic measure of catalytic impact and platform creation. Her legacy is materializing as a new archetype, the transnational catalyst. She demonstrates that the apex of success in the 21st century is not singular domination in one vertical, but the masterful orchestration of multiple domains: frontier technology, impact investing, cultural production, and strategic philanthropy into a cohesive, self-reinforcing force for specific, values-driven change. She lives a life that is both extravagantly, personally luxurious and strategically, monumentally consequential. Her story argues convincingly that one can champion the intricate artistry of Filipino piña embroidery and the world-altering potential of quantum computing not as separate hobbies, but as integrated facets of a single vision for influence. In doing so, she suggests that the future of immense wealth and power lies not in narrower specialization, but in the courageous, purposeful integration of all that one is and all that one holds dear into a life that actively builds, connects, and endures across generations, geographies, and the artificial boundaries between commerce and culture. To view Isabella Reyes solely through the lens of her public achievements is to see the lighthouse but not the beam that guides ships through the dark. Her true power lies in the intricate, often invisible, networks she has engineered, a web of influence that amplifies her reach far beyond her personal capacity. Yet, this empire of impact is built upon a foundation of profound personal trade-offs, a hidden ledger of costs that balance the public ledger of success. And as the arc of her story stretches into the future, it confronts pivotal questions that will define not just her legacy, but the very model of diasporic power she has come to represent. This final exploration maps the ecosystem of her influence, acknowledges the quiet sacrifices, and gazes toward the horizon where her wealth, vision, and identity face their ultimate test. The architecture of amplification, networks as a force multiplier. Isabella Reyes understands that influence in the 21st century is not a solo performance, but a symphony she conducts. She has built 3 concentric, interdependent networks that serve as her force multipliers. The inner command, the sanctum. This is not a traditional board of directors, but a council of realities. It comprises perhaps 5 individuals: her chief of staff, a former Swiss diplomat who navigates geopolitical nuances; her head of security, an ex-Mossad analyst who assesses physical and digital risk as one; her lead archivist, the scholar who grounds every cultural decision in deep historical context; her venture partner, who translates her visionary bets into actionable investment theses; and her personal physician, a longevity expert who treats her cognitive and physical stamina as critical assets of the enterprise. This group meets bi-weekly in a secure, undisclosed location. Their role is not to agree, but to interrogate. They are the red team, the devil's advocates, and the bearers of inconvenient truths. When she considers funding a fusion energy startup, the archivist might question its historical parallels to failed state projects, while the security head models its geopolitical ramifications. This council ensures that her intuition is always stress-tested by brutal, multidisciplinary pragmatism. The Diaspora Nexus, the Archipelago Network. Beyond the well-known figures, she has mapped and activated a second-layer diaspora network of professionals whose influence is operational, not ceremonial. This includes the head of procurement for a global hotel chain, influencing supply chains; the head of IP law at a major pharmaceutical company, shaping patent flows; and the head of programming for a dominant streaming algorithm, affecting cultural visibility. She connects them not through galas, but through solve sessions. A weekend at her ranch might gather 12 such individuals to tackle a single, specific problem: how to leverage diaspora professional power to fast-track FDA approval for critical generic medicines in the Philippines. The output is a concrete, actionable playbook, and each attendee leaves with a mandate in their domain. This transforms a scattered professional class into a coordinated, strategic force with a shared, tangible mission. The Bridge Network, the translators. These are the individuals who sit at the intersection of worlds she needs to connect. A former ambassador to ASEAN who now sits on the board of a major tech conglomerate, a celebrity chef who is also a serious investor in agricultural tech, the editor-in-chief of a venerable literary review who is obsessed with blockchain's potential for copyright. Reyes cultivates these translators with careful patronage and deep conversation. They are her cultural and linguistic interpreters, able to explain the value of a Filipino folk epic to a Silicon Valley futurist, or the mechanics of a neural network to a Parisian couturier. Through them, she brokers alliances that would be impossible in standard deal rooms, creating value at the intersections of culture, technology, and capital. The hidden ledger, the cost of a constructed life. The grandeur of her existence is counterweighted by a series of deep personal relinquishments that are the true price of her scale. The erosion of unmediated experience. For Reyes, almost no experience is truly direct or private. A walk on the beach is monitored by security. A visit to a museum is often a private after-hours tour, turning aesthetic contemplation into a semi-curatorial exercise. A meal with old friends is shadowed by the unspoken awareness of her stature and the potential for any casual comment to leak. This creates a life lived behind a perceptual filter, where spontaneity and pure, unself-conscious presence are the rarest luxuries. The self becomes a managed entity even in moments designed for authenticity. The burden of metric-driven existence. Her mindset of radical pragmatism, where everything must have a return, an impact, a metric, can colonize the personal. Philanthropy becomes impact investing. A child's interest in music is assessed for its potential to build discipline or cultural connection. Family vacations are opportunities for immersive geopolitical education. The danger is that the instrumental logic of Silicon Valley can overwhelm the intrinsic, messy value of human experience, leaving little room for things that are done purely for joy, for waste, for love, without strategic objective.
The anchor of past identity. There is an unavoidable and painful distance from the person she was before the wealth, the fame, the global footprint. The discarte of the scrappy immigrant student is now a boardroom parable, not a daily reality. She cannot fully return to that simpler self, nor does the global icon fully satisfy. She exists in a permanent state of constructive displacement, forever building bridges between her past and present identities, but never fully inhabiting either shore. This can manifest as a form of nostalgic grief for a life and a self that are forever out of reach. The horizon. Pivots, perils, and the ultimate question. The future of Isabella Reyes is a landscape of both immense opportunity and existential risk, where her next choices will cement her final narrative. The institutionalization imperative. Her greatest challenge is no longer scaling wealth, but scaling her philosophy. Can she encode her unique, integrated approach, the fusion of tech, culture, and diaspora leverage, into the DNA of her organizations so they thrive without her singular energy? This means hiring and promoting true believers who think in systems, not sectors. It means creating decision-making frameworks that automatically weigh cultural capital alongside financial return. It means building a leadership pipeline that reflects her hybrid worldview. If she fails at this, her life's work risks being dismantled into its component parts after she is gone. The foundation becoming a generic charity, the venture firm a conventional fund, the cultural projects fading into obscurity. The home gambit. The pressure for a defining, transformative act in the Philippines will become a crescendo. The truly audacious move would not be a donation or an investment, but the creation of a new institutional platform. Imagine her funding and spearheading the establishment of the Philippine University of Science and Advanced Technology, PUSAT, structured like a hybrid of MIT and a liberal arts college, with an endowment rivaling global peers, attracting world-class faculty, and operating with meritocratic autonomy free from political interference. This would be a century-defining bet, placing the Philippines on the global map of cutting-edge research. It would also be a minefield of political resistance, bureaucratic sabotage, and immense operational complexity. Does she risk her capital and reputation on such a monolithic, nation-building project? The personal legacy versus the dynastic temptation. A final, intimate tension surrounds her family. Having guarded her children's privacy fiercely, she faces the dilemma of whether to groom them as successors or to actively steer them toward independent lives untouched by the burdens of her legacy. Will she impose the expectation that they steward the constellation, potentially crushing their own aspirations under its weight? Or will she deliberately wind down or professionalize the management of her empire, gifting them financial security but not a preordained destiny? Her choice here will reveal her ultimate belief. Was all this built for a bloodline or for an idea? In the final analysis, Isabella Reyes stands at the apex of a new paradigm. She has demonstrated that the highest form of modern power is contextual fluency, the ability to move with authority and authenticity across the domains of technology, finance, high culture, and social impact, weaving them into a coherent personal and professional reality. Her life is an ongoing experiment in whether a single human consciousness, armed with immense resources, can hold multiple worlds together, and in doing so, create a new template for what it means to be successful, influential, and meaningful in a fragmented age. The richest title, in her case, is being pressure-forged into something richer. The challenge of being the architect of a lasting ecosystem. Her story is no longer about what she has, but about what she can weave, what she is willing to sacrifice to sustain it, and whether the intricate, beautiful tapestry of her making can survive the eventual removal of the hand that holds the loom.
The ultimate measure of Isabella Reyes will not be the peak of her fortune or the dazzle of her social conquests, but the depth and durability of the channels she carved for that fortune to flow long after she is gone. Having built the empire and demonstrated the model of the transnational catalyst, her final and most critical act is the design of her own obsolescence, the creation of systems that ensure her vision outlives her energy. This phase is about moving from active leadership to institutional architecture, from personal brand to perpetual engine. It involves confronting ethical dilemmas unique to her scale, making definitive choices about her relationship with the homeland, and answering the existential question that shadows every titan: what was all this for? This exploration delves into the blueprint of her enduring legacy. The Cornerstone Initiative, betting on the multilingual mind. Beyond generic scholarships, Reyes is constructing a flagship institution that embodies her core belief in cognitive diversity, the Polyglot Futures Institute, PFI. This is not a traditional university department, but a global hybrid research and talent foundry. Conceived with an initial endowment of $500 million, the PFI operates on a hub-and-spoke model. The primary hub is a stunning, sustainably built campus in a neutral, connective location like Lisbon or Vancouver. The spokes are embedded labs within top tech companies, Google, Samsung, financial institutions like Goldman Sachs and Singapore's GIC, and cultural power centers, the Louvre and the Shanghai Film Studio. The PFI's mission is to identify and hyper-accelerate individuals who are not just bilingual, but multi-contextual, young engineers who are also poets, data scientists steeped in indigenous storytelling traditions, policymakers who are accomplished musicians. Its one-year fellowship selects 50 individuals annually through a grueling game-based assessment that measures not IQ, but CQ, or contextual intelligence, the ability to reframe problems across different cultural and disciplinary lenses. Fellows spend quarters rotating through spokes, solving real-world challenges. A team might work on mitigating algorithmic bias at a tech spoke in Silicon Valley, then pivot to designing narrative-based public health campaigns in Southeast Asia at a policy spoke in the Global South. The curriculum is co-taught by Nobel laureates and master traditional craftsmen. The PFI's output is a new breed of leader who instinctively operates the way Reyes had to learn to do, by translating value across boundaries. This institution is her attempt to codify her own genius into a perpetual pipeline of individuals who will naturally sustain and evolve her worldview. The ethical gauntlet, navigating the shadows of power. At her altitude, every decision carries ethical weight that can crush lesser considerations. The data sovereignty dilemma. One of her venture fund's most successful bets is a company that provides cloud and AI infrastructure across emerging markets, including the Philippines. The company is now so integral to national functions, from banking to healthcare, that it effectively holds the keys to Philippine digital sovereignty. A foreign power could pressure its U.S. parent company for access. Does Reyes, as a major shareholder and board member, advocate for a radical and costly sovereign trust structure, legally walling off the Philippine data operations, even if it reduces profits and global synergy? Her choice here pits fiduciary duty against national security responsibility, a conflict her identity magnifies tenfold. The gilded cage of cultural patronage. Her support has made Filipino artists global stars, but this creates a subtle dependency.
Are artists now unconsciously creating work they believe will fit the Reyes collection aesthetic? Has she, by being the dominant patron, inadvertently homogenized the very diversity she sought to promote? She must constantly audit her own influence, perhaps secretly funding an anonymous critics fund or supporting artists who openly critique wealth inequality to ensure her patronage empowers rather than dictates. The family office as a shadow state. With investments in everything from water desalination plants to satellite networks, her family office's portfolio has more operational impact on daily life in certain regions than some government ministries. The ethical framework governing these investments, how they treat labor, the environment, local politics, becomes a de facto foreign policy. She is writing this ethical code in real time, knowing it will be a template for how ultra-wealthy diasporas interact with their homelands. The definitive homeland project, beyond charity, towards a new grammar of development. The clamor for her to fix something in the Philippines will be answered not with a hospital wing or a school, but with an urban systems laboratory in Metro Manila. Frustrated by the patchwork, politically corrupted approach to the megacity's crises, traffic, flooding, housing, she will fund a non-governmental, data-driven entity with a 50-year charter. This laboratory would not build roads itself, but would create the open-source, real-time digital twin of the city. It would integrate traffic flow, groundwater levels, power grid status, housing data, and population movement into a single, publicly accessible model. Its mandate would be to run endless simulations, proving to politicians and the public which interventions, a congestion pricing scheme here, a green corridor there, would have the highest systemic return. It would partner with universities to train a new cadre of civil servants in systems thinking. This project would be infuriatingly slow, unglamorous, and would enrage entrenched interests. But its goal is catalytic, to change the very grammar of public development in the Philippines from one of political patronage and short-term projects to one of evidence-based, systemic planning. It is a bet on changing minds, not just pouring concrete. The final accounting, measuring the immeasurable. As she looks toward the twilight of her active life, the metrics of success will undergo a final, profound shift. The Network Health Index. Instead of net worth, her team might develop a Network Health Index for her diaspora nexus, measuring the density of connections, the flow of talent and ideas between nodes, the number of collaborative projects launched without her direct involvement. A rising index would mean she had successfully created a self-sustaining community of practice. The cultural integration quotient. For her cultural work, success might be measured by the normalization of Filipino references in global discourse. When a Filipino philosophical concept like kapwa, shared identity, is routinely cited in international diplomacy seminars, or when a character in a mainstream Hollywood film casually speaks Tagalog without it being a plot point about ethnicity, that will be a signal her cultural advocacy has shifted the baseline. The resilience of the Polyglot Futures Institute. The ultimate test of the Polyglot Futures Institute will be the choices of its alumni. When a Polyglot Futures Fellow turns down a lucrative Wall Street offer to lead a cooperative fintech startup in Mindanao, or when another negotiates a climate treaty that ingeniously incorporates indigenous land rights concepts, that will be the living, breathing return on her most ambitious investment. In the end, Isabella Reyes's journey from immigrant to icon to institution builder presents a radical answer to the eternal question of value. It suggests that the highest use of wealth and influence is not in its display or even its direct application, but in the conscious design of new social and intellectual architectures. Her legacy is being drafted not in the marble of grand buildings bearing her name, but in the latent potential of the multilingual minds she is nurturing, in the ethical frameworks she is stress testing for a new era of diasporic power, and in the stubborn, systemic problems she is helping to reframe in her homeland. She is demonstrating that the richest life may be the one that spends itself not on monuments to the past, but on building the scaffolds for a more fluid, ethical, and intellectually generous future. a future where the boundaries she spent her life crossing are rendered obsolete by a new generation she helped equip to never see them in the first place. To walk through the world of Isabella Reyes is to move through a city that only she can see in its entirety, a metropolis of influence where each district serves a purpose, each boulevard leads to a calculated destination, and the private quarters are fortified beyond imagination. This city is not made of stone and glass alone. It is constructed from data, trust, silence, and the sheer will to maintain a self amidst the hurricane of her own making. If her public life is the skyline, dazzling, imposing, meant to be seen from afar, then her private existence is the underground infrastructure, the water mains, the fiber optic cables, the secure vaults. This is the domain where the richest title is truly tested, not by what she can buy, but by what she can protect, preserve, and truly experience for herself. Here, in the sanctums and shadows, the woman negotiates with the legend. Let us begin with her homes, for they are not addresses but operational bases with code names and specific psychic functions. The San Francisco penthouse is known to her inner team as the Bridge. It is less a home and more a living command module. Its windows are not just for views, they are layers of ballistic glass embedded with a microscopic mesh that disrupts long-range laser microphones. The open-plan living area, decorated in a calming palette of taupes and deep blues, is kept at a constant, precise temperature and humidity optimal for cognitive function. There is a chair, a single, impeccably designed ergonomic throne that faces the view. This is where she sits for her most important video calls, the cityscape behind her a deliberate symbol of connection. The art here is not just for beauty, it is sonic. A large, abstract sculpture in the corner is actually a resonant chamber designed by a sound artist to cancel low-frequency, anxiety-inducing noises from the city below. The library's collection is a physical map of her mind. First edition copies of Rizal's Noli Me Tangere sit beside signed editions of Silicon Valley manifestos and technical manuals on cryptography. Every object, from the Turkish rug to the Danish teak table, has been selected for its lack of electronic emissions, its inability to be weaponized as a listening device. This is where strategy is born, in a room designed to be a fortress for thought. Her Los Angeles estate is called the Atelier, and it serves as her external sensory organ and broadcast platform. Unlike the cool precision of the Bridge, the Atelier is warm, textured, alive. Its walls are lined with acoustical panels disguised as raw silk. It houses her Couture archive, which is managed with the rigor of a museum conservatory. Each gown, whether a classic Chanel suit or a dramatic Michele Cinco Terno, is stored in a breathable garment bag, its climate controlled, and its history logged in a blockchain-based digital ledger that records every wear, every cleaning, every minute repair. This isn't vanity, it is cultural curatorship. A wing of the house is a fully equipped production studio. She can and does record the Archipelago Review podcasts here, interviewing a Nobel physicist one day and a master Hablon weaver from Iloilo the next. The gardens are engineered for scent and sound, night-blooming jasmine from the Philippines, the gentle trickle of water over stone, creating an environment that subtly influences the mood of her guests, making them more open, more reflective. This home is where she manufactures and disseminates the narrative of integrated excellence, where the fusion of her worlds is performed and broadcast. Then there is the antithesis, the Montana property, codenamed The Root. This is where technology goes to die, or at least to sleep deeply. Access is by a rough dirt road miles from the main highway. There is no cell service. Internet is available only via a single heavily encrypted satellite terminal in a locked outbuilding, used strictly for emergencies. The main lodge is built from local timber and stone, but at its heart, in a clearing, stands a perfect replica of a Bahay kubo, the traditional Filipino stilt house. It was not built by a generic contractor. She commissioned a team of master craftsmen from Pampanga, flew in specific types of bamboo and nipa palm, and had them construct it using exactly the methods their grandfathers used. There is no plumbing inside it, there is no electricity. It is a sacred, empty shell. Her family sleeps in the comfortable, modern lodge, but their days are spent in and around the kubo, learning to cook sinigang in a clay pot over fire, trying to weave a simple basket, failing, trying again. The children are given real tools, not toys, and real tasks: mend a fence, identify edible plants, track an animal. The goal here is the deliberate induction of productive struggle, a counterbalance to a life where every ordinary desire is fulfilled instantly. This is where she forges the family mythology, where the Reyes story is manually carved into muscle memory and shared silence, far from the digital echo chamber.
Beyond the physical sanctuaries lies the more volatile frontier, her digital existence. Isabella Reyes does not have a digital footprint, she has a digital fortress. Her public face is the monolithic, static website, a polished granite slab of information. But behind it, her narrative defense unit, a team of 3 based in a nondescript office in Reykjavik for its legal and infrastructural privacy, wages constant war. They don't just monitor mentions, they model contagion. Using modified epidemiological software, they can predict how a rumor will spread across social media platforms, identifying key influencer nodes before the story even breaks. They maintain a suite of authentic-looking, dormant social media profiles across various platforms, not for her to use, but to create a background hum of plausible deniability and to surgically inject counter-narratives. Her own communications use a custom-built, air-gapped device that looks like an old, dull smartphone, but operates on a proprietary mesh network that piggybacks on commercial satellite signals, leaving no traceable signature on terrestrial grids. Her digital disappearance acts are as carefully planned as her public appearances. For 1 week, her team floods various data brokers with decoy information, false flight itineraries, phantom hotel bookings in Monaco, encrypted chatter suggesting a medical procedure in Switzerland, creating a cloud of noise in which her true vanishing act, perhaps to a silent retreat in a Japanese monastery, is completely hidden. At the center of this fortress, there are exactly 4 people who know the combination to the innermost vault. Not her husband, not her children, but her keepers of the real. First, her oldest friend from university, now a professor of linguistics in a small liberal arts college. They share a single annual weekend with no agenda, no security, just a rented cottage. This friend's only role is to call her by her childhood nickname and to ask, without judgment, "What are you afraid of right now?" Second, the head of her security, a former intelligence officer who can read a room's threat level in the micro-expressions of a waiter. Their trust is built on saved lives, both literal and metaphorical. Third, her personal archivist, the scholar who reminds her that today's crisis is a footnote in a centuries-long story. And fourth, a surprise, her personal chef, a woman from her mother's province who speaks little English and cares nothing for Silicon Valley. This chef's wisdom is in her hands, in the perfect consistency of her kare-kare peanut sauce, a taste that transports Reyes instantly to a kitchen in Pampanga, a sensation no amount of wealth can otherwise replicate. These 4 see the cracks in the facade, the fatigue, the occasional flicker of doubt, and their presence alone is a balm, a reminder that she is still human, still connected to something uncurated and true. The ultimate luxury, the final proof of her sovereignty over her own life, is her capacity for temporary non-existence. using a network of trusted pilots, discrete properties held under labyrinthine trusts, and the full might of her security team's misdirection protocols, she can, for precisely 7 days a year, become a ghost. She might be reading in a cabin in the Faroe Islands, watching storms rage against cliffs, or swimming in a secluded cenote in Mexico, utterly anonymous. In these moments, the engine of identity is switched off. There is no need to be the richest, the Filipina, the tech visionary, or the patron. There is only breath, landscape, and the simple animal fact of being alive. This is not an escape, it is a necessary system reboot for a consciousness that operates at a scale and complexity that would shatter a lesser mind. She returns from these voids not relaxed, but reset, the signal of her purpose clarified once more against the silence. Therefore, the unseen city of Isabella Reyes is a masterpiece of existential engineering. Its zoning laws are the boundaries she enforces between herselves. Its public works are the narratives she manages. Its power grid is the energy derived from those few pure human connections. And its parks, its empty spaces, are those sacred voids of disappearance. To be the richest is, in her lived reality, to possess the ultimate resources not for acquisition, but for the meticulous, relentless, and awe-inspiring defense and cultivation of a genuine self in a world hell-bent on turning it into a product. She lives not in a mansion, but in a fortress whose deepest, most secure chamber contains not gold, but the fragile, precious, and fiercely guarded flame of her own unmanufactured humanity. The narrative arc of a life like Isabella Reyes's does not conclude with a final business deal or a last philanthropic check. It enters a phase of distillation and intentional resonance. Having built the empires, fortified the private self, and engineered her legacy institutions, the final chapters are about the quality of her absence, the sound the bell makes after it has been struck. This is the season of mentorship without ego, of confronting the projects too vast for one lifetime, and of making peace with the beautiful, haunting incompleteness that is the fate of every great builder. Here, the richest Filipino woman in America transitions from architect to elder, from force to field, her influence becoming ambient, woven into the fabric of the worlds she touched. The pedagogy of presence, mentorship as legacy in real time. Reyes moves from the boardroom table to the fireside, literally and metaphorically. She initiates what she calls the long conversation, a year-round rotating mentorship program housed not in an office, but in her properties. Each quarter, she selects 4 emerging leaders, a mix from her PFI fellows, diaspora network standouts, and wildcard talents from unrelated fields like poetry or paleontology. They do not come for career advice, they come for a week of immersive Socratic dialogue. The setting is deliberate. The Baha'i Kubo in Montana, the Archive Room in LA, the Silent Library in San Francisco. The curriculum is a single massive question per session. What does it mean to be a good ancestor? How do you build an ethical system in a world of shifting truths? Where does cultural pride end and cultural isolation begin? She does not lecture, she facilitates, using her own life as a case study, not a blueprint. She will walk them through her famous failed investment in a bioplastic startup, showing them the internal memos, the blind spots in the due diligence, the moment her ego overruled her team's caution. She will share the private, agonizing journal entries from when a curated cultural exhibition was criticized as paternalistic. Her vulnerability becomes her most powerful teaching tool. She is not imparting secrets of success, but a methodology for navigating failure, ambiguity, and the weight of choice.
The goal is not to create mini Reyeses, but to equip thinkers with her diagnostic tools, the ability to see systems, weigh cultural capital, and bear the loneliness of leadership, so they may build their own entirely different castles. These conversations are recorded and transcribed, not for public release, but to form the core of a private, posthumous archive, the Reyes Dialogues, a manual of applied wisdom for those who will shape the century to come. The unfinished symphony, the projects that will outpace her. Even her boundless energy meets the finite horizon of a lifetime. She now openly acknowledges and funds the Century Projects, initiatives whose full fruition she will never see, placing her faith in compound interest and future generations. The Climate Archive. Beyond conservation, she funds a radical project to genetically sequence and cryopreserve the entire endemic biosphere of the Philippine archipelago, every moss, insect, fish, and flower, storing the data and samples in a sovereign, geologically stable vault. The project brief states its goal is to provide the biological blueprint for potential restoration centuries hence, an act of fiduciary responsibility toward life itself. The Infinitive Language Engine. A collaboration between computational linguists and tribal elders across the Philippines, this aims to use AI not to translate, but to model the cognitive worldviews embedded in endangered Philippine languages. It is a project against epistemic extinction. The Trustless Trust. Her most abstract and ambitious venture is an attempt to codify her ethical investment framework into an autonomous, blockchain-based legal structure. This trustless trust would be a fund that operates by a constitution of ethical principles, e.g., no investment that increases water scarcity, mandatory profit sharing with local knowledge holders. Its governance would be algorithmic, guided by AIs trained on her lifetime of decisions and the stated values of a rotating council of global ethicists. It is her attempt to build a conscience that can outlive human frailty and greed. The art of graceful diminishment. Curating the exit. The consummate strategist plans her withdrawal from the center stage with the same precision as her entrance. She begins a strategic fading. Her public speeches become rarer, each one a polished gem of summation rather than a new manifesto. She steps down from public boards, installing her most trusted protégés. She starts gifting significant chunks of her art collection, not to museums, but to public libraries and community centers across the Philippines and in underserved American neighborhoods, with the stipulation that they be displayed where people gather, not in hushed halls. The Couture archive is donated to a fashion institute, with an endowment for its study and for scholarships for Filipino design students. This is not a dispersal, but a strategic seeding, placing the fragments of her cultural capital in fertile ground where they can grow new, independent trees. The inner metric, from impact to peace. In the quieting, the internal scoreboard changes. The questions are no longer, what did I build, but did I love well, and was I brave in my honesty? Her relationship with her children moves into its most important phase, witnessing them build lives of purpose, free from the shadow of her brand, knowing she gave them roots in Montana and wings of their own forging. Her marriage, the silent, stable partnership that weathered the storm of her ascent, deepens into a profound companionship of shared memory and quiet understanding. She finds joy in the microscopic, the perfect brewing of her morning coffee, the handwriting in a thank you note from a scholar she funded decades ago, the changing light on the Montana hills. The scale of her attention, once planetary, shrinks to the deeply, richly local and personal. The billionaire's restlessness gives way to the elder's contentment. The final, unanswerable question: what was it for? In her most private moments, the question returns. The synthesis she arrives at is not a single answer, but a triad of realizations. First, it was for proof of concept, to show a young girl in Pampanga or Quezon City that the ceilings she sees are made of glass, not stone, and that with the right tools, relentless will, and a community to lift you, they can be shattered. Second, it was for the act of translation itself, to serve as a living Rosetta Stone between the world of her heritage and the world of her opportunity, proving they are not opposites, but complementary forces, and in doing so, enriching both. Third, and perhaps most simply, it was for the sheer, audacious artistry of it, to take the raw materials of a life, talent, circumstance, pain, joy, and sculpt them into a form so complex, so bold, and so uniquely her own that it would stand as a testament to human potential. The echo of Isabella Reyes will not be a single note, it will be a complex chord, the hum of the Polyglot Institute's servers, the rustle of pages in a rural library now housing a masterpiece she once owned, the debate of a future leader quoting a principle from the Reyes dialogues, the silent growth of a coral polyp in a reef her climate archive helped preserve. She will have moved from being a figure in the landscape to becoming part of the landscape itself, the climate in which future dreams are formed. Her story, from Couture to Silicon Valley and into the infinite quiet, ultimately argues that the richest life is not the one that accumulates the most in its vaults, but the one that successfully, gracefully, turns itself into a gift, a question, a tool, a space, a story, for the future to unwrap and use in ways she, in her magnificent foresight, could never fully imagine.